The alarm bells screamed through the bridge of the USS Vengeance as Commander Jake Morrison rushed to his command chair. Red lights flashed across every screen, and the communications officer was frantically adjusting his headset. Something terrible was happening in the Kepler system, and Jake could feel it in his bones. "Report," Jake ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "Sir, we're getting emergency signals from all 3 Kepler worlds," said Lieutenant Amy Foster, her fingers dancing across the communication console. "The signals are weak and breaking up, but it sounds like they're under attack." Jake felt his stomach drop. The Keplers had been humanity's first allies when Earth joined the galactic community 23 years ago. They were peaceful beings who looked like tall, blue-skinned humans with large, kind eyes. They had shared their technology freely and had never asked for anything in return except friendship. "Put me through to Admiral Carter immediately," Jake commanded. The main screen flickered to life, showing the weathered face of Admiral Paul Carter. The old man looked tired, but his eyes were sharp and alert. Behind him, Jake could see the busy bridge of the Earth Defense Fleet headquarters. "Jake, I was just about to contact you," the Admiral said. "We've lost contact with Kepler Prime. The last transmission we received was ... disturbing." "What did they say, sir?" Admiral Carter's expression grew dark. "They said the Vaxxan Empire had come for them. They said their cities were burning." Jake had heard of the Vaxxan Empire. They were a militaristic race that controlled a large section of the galaxy through fear and violence. They believed that only the strong deserved to survive, and they treated other species like insects to be crushed. The Galactic Council had always been too afraid to stand up to them. "Sir, we need to send ships to help them," Jake said urgently. "We're already moving," Admiral Carter replied. "Captain Lisa Hayes is taking the USS Harmony to assess the situation. You're to follow with the combat fleet, but Jake ... The Admiral paused, his voice growing heavy. "I'm not sure we're going to like what we find." 3 hours later, Jake's fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system. What they saw made several crew members gasp in horror. The beautiful blue-green world of Kepler Prime, once home to over 50 million beings, was now a brown and gray wasteland. Massive craters dotted the surface where cities used to stand. The orbital stations that had welcomed human visitors for decades were nothing but floating debris. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Foster, "they're all gone." Captain Lisa Hayes' voice crackled over the communication system from the USS Harmony. "Jake, we're detecting some life signs on the surface. Very few, but they're there. I'm taking a team down to investigate." Jake watched on the main screen as Captain Hayes and her rescue team landed on what used to be the capital city of Kepler Prime. The buildings had been melted into glass by intense heat. The beautiful gardens and parks were now ash and dust. Bodies lay scattered in the streets, and the few survivors they found were hiding in underground shelters. Captain Hayes found a group of 20 Keplers huddled in a basement beneath a destroyed school. Their leader, an elderly Kepler named Zenthka, could barely speak. His blue skin was pale with shock, and his large eyes were filled with tears. "They came without warning," Zenthka said in his musical voice. "Ships filled the sky like a dark cloud. They demanded we surrender, but we are not warriors. We tried to talk to them, to reason with them. They laughed at us." Captain Hayes knelt beside the old Kepler. "What did they want?" "They wanted us dead," Zenthka replied. "They said we were weak and that weak species had no right to exist. They said they would cleanse the galaxy of all inferior races, they said." He paused, his voice breaking. "They said humans would be next." The rescue team found similar scenes across the planet. The Vaxxan had not just attacked military targets. They had systematically destroyed every city, every town, every settlement. They had hunted down civilians and killed them without mercy. It was not war. It was genocide. Back on the USS Vengeance, Jake received reports from the other 2 Kepler worlds. The story was the same everywhere. The Vaxxan fleet had arrived in overwhelming numbers and had shown no mercy. The Kepler's peaceful nature had made them easy targets. Their advanced technology meant nothing when they refused to use it for war. "Sir," Lieutenant Foster called out, We're receiving a transmission from the Kepler fleet. It's Admiral Zenthka. Jake had met the Kepler admiral many times. He was Zenthka's younger brother and had been one of the few Keplers who understood the need for military defense. The two had become friends over the years, sharing stories about their different worlds and cultures. The image that appeared on the screen broke Jake's heart. Admiral Zenthka's ship was badly damaged, smoke filling the bridge behind him. His blue skin was burned and his uniform was torn, but his eyes still held the same kindness that Jake remembered. "My friend Jake," Admiral Zenthka said weakly, "I'm sorry to bring you this news. My fleet is destroyed. My people are gone. The Vaxen have won. We'll send ships to help you," Jake said desperately. "We can still fight them." Admiral Zenthka shook his head sadly. "No, my friend, it is too late for us, but you must prepare. The Vaxen commander spoke of Earth before he ordered our destruction. He said humans were growing too strong, too dangerous. He said you would be next." The transmission flickered as another explosion rocked the Kepler ship. Admiral Zenthka struggled to stay upright. "Jake, you must warn your people. The Vaxen are not like other enemies. They do not want territory or resources. They want to destroy anyone who might challenge them. And they fear what humans might become." "We won't let them get away with this," Jake said, his voice filled with anger. Admiral Zenthka smiled sadly. "I know you will try. But please do not let revenge consume you. We Keplers chose peace and it led to our destruction. But do not become like them. Do not let them turn you into monsters." The transmission cut off as the Kepler ship exploded in a ball of fire. Jake stared at the empty screen, his hands clenched into fists. Around him, the bridge crew stood in stunned silence. The next day, Jake received another blow. The Galactic Council had met in emergency session to discuss the Kepler situation. The result was exactly what Jake had feared. In a vote of 847 to 1, the Council had decided to dissolve the Human-Kepler Mutual Defense Pact. They claimed it was to prevent further Vaxen aggression, but Jake knew the truth. They were afraid. Only the Altarian delegate had voted against the motion. The rest of the galaxy's civilizations had abandoned humanity without a second thought. The same species that had welcomed human technology and trade were now turning their backs on Earth in its hour of need. "Sir," Lieutenant Foster said quietly, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Defense Command." Admiral Carter appeared on the screen again, but this time he looked different. The tiredness was gone, replaced by something harder and more dangerous. "Jake, bring the fleet home immediately. President Cross is calling an emergency session of the United Earth Defense Council. The Vaxen have made their intentions clear, and long-range sensors have detected their main fleet changing course toward our system." Jake nodded grimly. "How long do we have?" "Intelligence estimates 6 months before they reach the outer solar system. 6 months to prepare for the fight of our lives." As the USS Vengeance jumped to hyperspace, Jake looked back at the dead Kepler worlds one last time. The Vaxen had wanted to send a message to the galaxy. They had succeeded, but Jake suspected they had made a terrible mistake. They had awakened something in humanity that had been sleeping since Earth joined the galactic community. The Vaxen thought they knew humans. They thought Earth was just another weak civilization that would surrender when faced with superior force. They had forgotten that humans had been fighting wars for thousands of years before they ever left their home planet. They had forgotten that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one that has nothing left to lose. The journey back to Earth took 2 days. During that time, Jake received reports from across the galaxy. The Vaxen were not stopping with Keplers. They were systematically destroying any species they considered a potential threat. The galaxy was watching in terror as one of its oldest civilizations was methodically erasing anyone who might stand against them, but the Vaxen had made one crucial error. They had assumed that humanity would react like every other species in the galaxy. They expected Earth to surrender or to beg for mercy. They had no idea that humans had a very different response to bullies. They were about to learn that when you destroy someone's friends, you do not make them afraid, you make them Angry, and angry humans are the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. The emergency session of the United Earth Defense Council took place in the deepest level of the Pentagon, behind doors that could withstand a nuclear blast. President Amanda Cross sat at the head of the long table, her face pale but determined. Around her, the most powerful people on Earth waited in tense silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," President Cross began, her voice echoing in the secure chamber, "we are here because humanity faces its greatest threat since the dawn of civilization. The Keplers are dead. Our allies in the Galactic Council have abandoned. U.S. and the Vaxxan Empire is coming for Earth." Admiral Paul Carter stood up, his uniform crisp despite the exhaustion in his eyes. "Madam President, our intelligence suggests the Vaxxan fleet will reach the outer solar system in approximately 5 months and 3 weeks. They have over 2,000 ships, including their largest battle cruisers." General Robert Hayes, the head of Earth's ground forces, leaned forward. "What about the other human colonies? Can we evacuate them?" "The colonies are too far away," replied Admiral Carter. "The Vaxxan will reach Earth first. If we fall, the colonies will be defenseless anyway." President Cross looked around the table, at the faces of Earth's leaders. She saw fear, but she also saw something else. Something that had been building since the first reports came in from the Kepler system. It was anger. Cold, calculating anger. "Fleet Admiral Kevin Ross," she said, turning to a man who had been sitting quietly in the corner. "I believe you have something to show us." Admiral Ross was different from the other military leaders. He was younger, but his eyes held secrets. He had been working on classified projects for years, projects that most people in the room had never heard of. "Yes, Madam President," Admiral Ross said, standing up. "I need to tell you about Project Blackout." He pressed a button on his tablet, and the lights dimmed. A holographic display appeared above the table, showing what looked like a star map of the solar system. But there were structures marked on it that nobody recognized. "For the past 15 years, we have been building shipyards in secret locations throughout the outer solar system," Admiral Ross explained. "Hidden bases behind asteroids, inside moons, even inside the rings of Saturn. The Galactic Council knew about our public shipyards, but they never knew about these." President Cross felt her heart racing. "What kind of ships have you been building?" "Ships designed for war, Madam President." "Real war, not the kind of polite conflicts the galaxy is used to, but the kind of total warfare that humans have been perfecting for thousands of years." The holographic display changed, showing sleek, dark ships unlike anything in the current Earth fleet. They were smaller than the massive Vaxxan vessels, but they looked deadly in a way that made everyone in the room uncomfortable. "We studied every war in human history," Admiral Ross continued, "from ancient battles with swords and shields to modern conflicts with nuclear weapons. We learned that the most important thing in war is not size or power. It is surprise, speed, and the will to do whatever it takes to win." Dr. Rachel Stone, the head of Earth's Weapons Development Division, stood up next. She was a small woman with gray hair, but her voice was strong and confident. "The galaxy thinks they understand human technology," she said. "They have seen our trade ships and our exploration vessels. They think we are just another peaceful species that happened to develop space travel. They are wrong." The holographic display showed a cross-section of one of the new ships. The weapon systems were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. While other species focused on energy shields and plasma weapons, we took a different approach, Dr. Stone explained. "We built kinetic weapons that can punch through any known shielding. We developed quantum torpedoes that can phase through solid matter. And we created stealth systems that make our ships nearly invisible." President Cross stared at the display in amazement. "How many of these ships do we have?" "Currently, we have 437 ships in various stages of completion," Admiral Ross replied. "By the time the Vaxxan arrive, we will have over 600. Each one is worth 10 of their vessels in combat effectiveness." "But will it be enough?" asked General Hayes. "They have thousands of ships," Admiral Ross smiled grimly. "General, the Vaxxan have made the same mistake that every enemy in human history has made. They think quantity is more important than quality. They think fear is more powerful than determination. They are about to learn otherwise. Commander Alex Turner, who had been silent throughout the meeting, finally spoke up. He was the leader of the Ghost Squadron, a group of pilots who had been training with the new ships for years. "Sir, my squadron has been running combat simulations for months," he said. "The Vaxxan ships are big and powerful, but they are slow and predictable. They rely on overwhelming firepower and intimidation. Our ships are designed to hit fast and disappear before the enemy can react." President Cross looked around the table. Again, the fear she had seen earlier was being replaced by something else, hope, and beneath that hope, she could see the same cold anger that was building in her own heart. "What about the crew?" she asked. "Do we have enough people to operate these ships?" "We have been secretly recruiting and training personnel for years," Admiral Ross replied. "Many of our best pilots and officers have been told they were working on experimental projects. They never knew they were preparing for war." Captain Lisa Hayes, who had returned from the Kepler system just hours earlier, raised her hand. "Admiral, I have seen what the Vaxxan did to our friends. I have seen entire cities turn to glass. I have looked into the eyes of survivors who watched their families die. Whatever these ships can do, it is not enough. We need to make sure the Vaxxan can never do this to anyone else." Admiral Ross nodded approvingly. "Captain Hayes, that is exactly what these ships are designed to do. They are not just weapons, they are a statement, a message to the galaxy that some lines should never be crossed." Dr. Stone activated another part of the holographic display. This time, it showed detailed schematics of weapon systems that looked almost alien in their complexity. "The Vaxxan believe in brute force," she explained. "They build bigger guns and stronger shields. We built smarter weapons. Our railguns can accelerate projectiles to 12% the speed of light. At that velocity, even a small piece of metal becomes a planet killer." "And if they try to run?" asked President Cross. "They will not be able to," Commander Turner replied. "Our ships are faster than anything in the galaxy. We can appear anywhere in the solar system within minutes. There will be no escape." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed what they were hearing. Earth had been preparing for this kind of war for 15 years. While the galaxy had been living in peace, humans had been building the most advanced military force in known space. "There is something else," Admiral Ross said quietly. "Something that the Vaxxan do not understand about humans. They think we are weak because we choose to be peaceful. They think we are soft because we make friends with other species. They are wrong." He looked directly at President Cross. "Madam President, every human on Earth knows what happened to the Keplers. The news broadcasts have shown the burned cities and the dead children. Our people are not afraid. They are angry. And when humans get angry, we do not just fight to win. We fight to make sure the threat is eliminated forever." President Cross stood up, her decision made. "Admiral Ross, you have my authorization to activate all hidden shipyards. Commander Turner, prepare your pilots for combat. Dr. Stone, I want every weapon system operational within 3 months." She paused, looking around the table at the faces of Earth's leaders. The Vaxxan wanted to send a message to the galaxy. They destroyed our friends to show everyone what happens when you oppose them. They are about to learn that they picked the wrong species to threaten. General Hayes cleared his throat. "Madam President, what about the other galactic civilizations? They abandoned us, but they might still try to interfere." "Let them try," President Cross replied coldly. "They had their chance to stand up to the Vaxxan. They chose cowardice. Now they will watch as humanity shows them what real strength looks like." Admiral Carter, who had been quiet during most of the meeting, finally spoke. "Madame President, once we begin this path, there will be no turning back. The galaxy will never see humanity the same way again." President Cross nodded grimly. "Good. For too long, we have tried to fit in with the galactic community. We have hidden our true nature to make other species comfortable. The Vaxxan have reminded us who we really are." She walked to the window that looked out over the city. Even through the thick glass, she could see the lights of Washington, D.C. spreading out below. Somewhere out there, 300 million Americans were going about their daily lives, unaware that their world was about to change forever. "The vaccine think they know humans," she said softly. "They think we are just another weak species that will surrender when faced with superior numbers. They are about to discover that humans have been fighting wars since before we invented the wheel. They are about to learn that when you threaten our friends, you do not make us afraid. You make us dangerous." The meeting ended with orders flying in all directions. Hidden shipyards across the solar system came online. Secret training facilities began operating around the clock. War Prime Kythex stood on the bridge of his flagship, the destroyer of worlds, and watched the stars of the Sol system grow brighter through the massive viewing window. Behind him, 2,000 Vaxxan warships stretched out in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the dark metal that had conquered 100 worlds. Kythex was proud of his fleet. Each ship was a masterpiece of destruction, built for one purpose: to crush any species that dared to challenge the Vaxxan Empire. The humans would see this armada approaching and surrender immediately, just like every other weak civilization they had encountered. "War Prime," called his communications officer, a young Vaxxan with the ritual scars of a dozen battles across his gray skin. "We are now entering the outer edge of the human solar system. Our sensors show no defensive formations waiting for us." Kythex smiled, showing his sharp teeth. "Of course not. The humans are cowards, just like their Kepler friends. They are probably hiding on their little planet, hoping we will show mercy." The Vaxxan had been monitoring human communications for months. They had listened to the panic in Earth's government, the desperate calls for help that went unanswered by the Galactic Council. The humans were alone and afraid, exactly as Kythex had planned. "Begin the search pattern," he ordered. "I want to know where every human ship is hiding. We will destroy their fleet first, then their cities. Leave no survivors." What Kythex did not know was that his every move was being watched. Hidden in the asteroid belt, Lieutenant Commander Nina Brooks sat in the pilot seat of the USS Shadow, one of the most advanced reconnaissance ships ever built. Her ship was so small and quiet that it barely registered as a piece of space debris on Vaxxan sensors. "Control, this is Shadow 1, Nanya whispered into her headset. "The enemy fleet has spread out across the system. They are moving in standard search formation, just like our intelligence predicted." The voice that answered her came from Admiral Jake Morrison, now commanding the human fleet from his new flagship, the USS Vengeance. "Confirmed, Shadow 1. All units begin Phase 1 of Operation Payback." Nina smiled as she watched the Vaxxan ships spreading out like a net across the solar system. They were looking for human ships to destroy, but they had no idea that the human ships were already surrounding them. The first Vaxxan ship to die was the heavy cruiser Bone Crusher. It was moving slowly through the outer asteroid belt, its powerful sensors sweeping for hidden human bases. The ship's captain, War Leader Zekthos, was feeling confident. His vessel was one of the most powerful in the fleet, armed with enough weapons to destroy a moon. "Nothing here but rocks and ice," he told his crew. "The humans are probably cowering behind their home planet." Those were the last words he ever spoke. The railgun slug that hit his ship was no bigger than a telephone pole, but it was moving at 36,000 kilometers per second. It punched through the Bone Crusher's shields like they were made of paper and tore through the hull. From bow to stern. The ship simply vanished in a ball of fire and twisted metal. There was no time for a distress signal, no warning for the rest of the fleet. One moment the Bone Crusher was there, and the next moment it was gone. Captain Ryan Powell watched the destruction through the targeting scope of his ship, the USS Reaper. His vessel was the first of the new Dreadnought-class ships, designed to take on entire enemy fleets single-handedly. The railgun that had just fired was only one of dozens of weapons hidden throughout his ship. "Target destroyed," he reported calmly, moving to next firing position. The USS Reaper disappeared into the darkness between asteroids, invisible to Vaccine sensors. It would reappear somewhere else in a few minutes. Ready to kill again. War Prime Kythex received the news of the Bone Crusher's destruction with confusion rather than alarm. Probably hit an asteroid, he muttered. These humans are so primitive they probably left mining charges scattered around their system, but then the second ship died. The battlecruiser Painbringer was exploring the outer edge of the system when something hit it amidships. The explosion was so powerful it cracked the ship in half, sending pieces spinning off into space. This time, the ship's communications officer managed to send a brief message before the ship broke apart. Under attack. Unknown weapons. Cannot identify. The signal cut off as the ship's reactor exploded. War Prime Kythex felt the first stirring of unease. 2 ships destroyed within an hour, and his fleet had not even seen the enemy. All ships maintain formation. Report anything unusual immediately. But the attacks continued. The Vaxxon fleet was spread across billions of kilometers of space, and the human ships were picking them off one by one. Each attack came without warning, and each attack was perfectly executed. The USS Ghost, commanded by Lieutenant Commander Alex Turner, specialized in close-range assassination. His ship could phase in and out of normal space, appearing next to enemy vessels like a nightmare made real. Turner's favorite tactic was to materialize directly above an enemy ship and fire quantum torpedoes straight down into their hull. The torpedoes were Dr. Rachel Stone's masterpiece. They could phase through solid matter, passing through shields and armor like they were not there. They would only become solid again when they reached the target's reactor core. Turner's target was the heavy destroyer Skull Splitter. He watched it through his ship's sensors as it moved slowly through the outer planets, searching for human bases that did not exist. Activating phase drive, Turner announced to his crew. Preparing to engage. The USS Ghost vanished from normal space and reappeared 200 meters directly above the Skull Splitter. Before the Vaxxon crew could react, Turner fired 4 quantum torpedoes straight down into their ship. The torpedoes passed through the Skull Splitter's hull like it was made of air. They materialized inside the ship's reactor room and exploded with the force of a small star. The entire ship was consumed in a white-hot fireball that could be seen from 1,000,000 kilometers away. By the time War Prime Kythex realized what was happening, he had lost over 50 ships. His perfect formation was in chaos, with captains reporting phantom attacks and invisible enemies. Ships were dying faster than his communications officers could report their losses. "How are they doing this?" he roared at his sensor operators. "Where are the human ships?" "War Prime, we cannot detect them," his chief sensor officer replied, his voice shaking with fear. "Our instruments show empty space, but our ships keep dying." For the first time in his career, Kythex felt something he had never experienced before. Fear, not the healthy respect for danger that came with battle, but real, deep fear of an enemy he could not see or understand. "All ships, close formation," he ordered. "We regroup and advance on the human homeworld together. They cannot hide from us forever." But the human ships were not hiding. They were hunting. And they were very good at it. Captain Lisa Hayes commanded the USS Phantom, a ship designed for psychological warfare. Her job was not just to destroy enemy vessels, but to terrify the survivors. She had been monitoring Vaxxon communications, listening to the growing panic in their voices. Time to send them a message, she told her crew. The USS Phantom appeared directly in front of the Vaxxon cruiser Deathbringer, so close that the 2 ships were almost touching. Before the Vaxxon crew could react, Hayes opened a communication. "Channel, this is Captain Lisa Hayes of the Earth Defense Fleet," she said calmly. "You destroyed our friends. You murdered innocent people. Now you will learn what humans do to bullies." The Deathbringer's captain tried to fire his weapons, but the USS Phantom was already moving. Hayes' ship danced around the larger vessel, like a fighter plane around a bomber, firing precision shots that disabled weapons and engines without destroying the ship. "You are beaten," Hayes continued over the open channel. "Your ship is crippled. You have 2 choices. You can surrender and live, or you can die like your friends. Choose quickly." The Vaxxon captain chose to fight. It was a mistake. Hayes next. Shot turned the Deathbringer into a cloud of glowing particles. War Prime. Kythex heard the entire exchange over his fleet's communication system. The human female had sounded completely calm, almost bored. She had been offering mercy to an enemy. That had shown none to her people, and when that mercy was rejected, she had killed without hesitation. War Prime, his communications officer called out, "We are receiving a message on all frequencies." "It is from the human fleet commander." The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of a human ship. The man who appeared was older, with gray hair and cold eyes. He wore the uniform of an Earth admiral, and behind him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency. "I am Admiral Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Fleet," the human said. "You are War Prime Kythex, the Butcher of New Kepler Prime? We have been waiting for you." Kythex found his voice. "Human, you are outnumbered 1,000 to 1. Surrender now, and I will make your deaths quick." Admiral Morrison smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "War Prime, you have already lost over 100 ships, and you have not even seen our main fleet yet. Your formation is broken, your crews are panicking, and you still do not understand what you are facing. What are you talking about, human?" "You think you are hunters," Morrison replied. "You think you are the predators and we are the prey. You are wrong. We are not hiding from you." War Prime Kythex stared at his tactical display in growing horror. What had started as a glorious hunt had become a nightmare. Half of his fleet was gone, destroyed by an enemy he could barely see. The remaining ships were scattered across the solar system, their crews paralyzed by fear. "War Prime," his communications officer said with a trembling voice. "The outer squadrons are requesting permission to retreat. They say the humans are everywhere." Kythex slammed his fist on the command console. "There will be no retreat. We are the Vaxxan Empire. We do not run from inferior species." But even as he spoke the words, he could hear the doubt in his own voice. The humans were not fighting like any enemy he had ever faced. They appeared without warning, struck with devastating precision, and vanished before his ships could respond. It was like fighting ghosts on the bridge of the USS Vengeance. Admiral Jake Morrison watched the chaos spreading through the Vaxxan fleet. His officers worked quietly around him, coordinating the systematic destruction of an empire that had thought itself invincible. "Admiral," reported Commander Alex Turner from his Ghost Squadron, "enemy formation is completely broken. They are attempting to regroup near the gas giant Jupiter, but our ships are blocking all escape routes." Jake nodded grimly. "Proceed to Phase 2. It is time to show them what humans do when we stop playing games." The USS Vengeance moved out of the asteroid field where it had been hiding, leading a formation of 50 Dreadnought-class warships. These were the largest vessels in the human fleet, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy a planet. They had been waiting patiently while the smaller ships softened up the enemy, War Prime. Kythex saw them coming on his long-range sensors and felt a moment of relief. Finally, an enemy he could see and fight. The human ships were impressive, but they were outnumbered 20 to 1 by his remaining forces. "All ships, target the human battle group," he ordered. "We will crush them and show the galaxy that the Vaxxan Empire cannot be defeated." The two fleets met in the space between Mars and Jupiter, and the battle that followed would be remembered for centuries. But it was not the glorious combat that Kythex had expected. The human ships moved like dancers, weaving between the massive Vaxxan vessels with impossible grace. Their weapons fired in perfect coordination, each shot calculated to do maximum damage. Where Vaxxan ships fired wildly in all directions, human weapons struck with surgical precision. Captain Ryan Powell commanded the USS Reaper as it tore through the enemy formation. His ship's railguns fired continuously, each shot traveling so fast that it appeared as a streak of light. Vaxxan ships that had withstood the weapons of a dozen species were torn apart like paper dolls. "Target the command ship," Powell ordered. His weapons officer, "Time to cut off the head of this snake." The USS Reaper's main gun charged with a sound like thunder. The weapon that fired was not just a railgun, but a mass accelerator that could hurl a projectile at 15% the speed of light. When it struck the destroyer of worlds, the impact created a flash of light that could be seen from Earth. War Prime Kythex felt his flagship shudder under the impact. Emergency lights flashed red across his bridge as damage reports flooded in. His ship, the pride of the Vaxxon fleet, was dying around him. "Damage report," he shouted. "War Prime, we have lost main engines, weapons are offline, and we have hull breaches on 17 decks," his engineering officer reported. "The ship is breaking apart." Through the smoke and chaos, Kythex saw something that made his blood freeze. Human ships were attaching themselves to the hulls of damaged Vaxxon vessels, boarding parties. The humans were not content to simply destroy his fleet. They wanted prisoners. Colonel Sarah Mitchell led the first wave of human Marines as they cut through the hull of the Vaxxon cruiser Blood Drinker. The aliens inside had never faced human soldiers in close combat, and they were not prepared for what they encountered. Human Marines wore powered armor that made them faster and stronger than any Vaxxon warrior. Their weapons fired projectiles that could punch through the thickest alien armor. But more importantly, they fought with a cold fury that the Vaxxon had never seen before. "Remember what they did to the Keplers?" Colonel Mitchell told her troops as they advanced through the alien ship. "No mercy. No prisoners unless they surrender immediately." The Vaxxon crew fought desperately, but they were not prepared for human tactics. The Marines moved through the ship like a plague, clearing room after room with ruthless efficiency. Those who surrendered were taken prisoner. Those who fought were killed without hesitation. Within an hour, the Blood Drinker was under human control. Colonel Mitchell stood on the alien bridge, looking at the cowering Vaxxon officers who had thrown down their weapons. "You are now prisoners of the Earth Defense Fleet," she announced. "You will be treated according to human military law. That is more mercy than you showed the Keplers." Similar scenes were playing out across dozens of ships. The Vaxxon Empire, which had built its reputation on fear and brutality, was learning what it meant to face an enemy that was not afraid. Back on the USS Vengeance, Dr. Rachel Stone was coordinating a different kind of warfare. Her psychological operations team had been monitoring Vaxxon communications since the battle began, and now they were ready to deliver their message. "Broadcast on all Vaxxon frequencies," she ordered her communications officer across the battlefield. Every surviving Vaxxon ship received the same transmission. It showed the burned cities of New Kepler Prime, the bodies of dead Kepler children, and the few survivors huddled in underground shelters. "This is what you did to our friends, Doctor," Stone's voice said over the images. "You murdered millions of innocent people because you thought they were weak. You thought there would be no consequences? You were wrong." The transmission switched to show recordings of the current battle. Vaxxon ships exploding under human fire. Alien crews surrendering to human Marines. The proud empire reduced to scattered debris floating in space. "You wanted to send a message to the galaxy," Dr. Stone continued. "You wanted to show everyone what happens when they oppose the Vaxxon Empire. Consider your message delivered. This is what happens when you threaten humanity's friends." The psychological impact was devastating. Vaxxon crews who had been raised to believe in their own superiority were watching their empire crumble in real time. Many ships simply stopped fighting. Their crews too demoralized to continue. War Prime Kythex, trapped on his dying flagship, watched the transmission with growing despair. His great fleet was gone. His empire's reputation was shattered. And the humans were not finished with him yet. "War Prime," his communications officer said quietly, "we are receiving a transmission from the human admiral." Admiral Morrison's face appeared on the screen again, but this time he was not alone. Standing beside him was Captain Lisa Hayes, holding a data pad in her hands. "War Prime Kythex," Admiral Morrison said, "your fleet is destroyed. Your empire's invasion has failed. But we have discovered something interesting in your ship's computers." Captain Hayes stepped forward. "Our intelligence teams have been analyzing your communications. We know about your home fleet. We know they are mobilizing for a full-scale invasion. And we know the location of your homeworld." Kythex felt his heart stop. The humans had not just defeated his fleet. They had captured enough information to strike back at the heart of the Vaxan Empire. "You cannot attack our homeworld," he said desperately. "The Galactic Council will not allow it." Admiral Morrison smiled coldly. "The Galactic Council abandoned us when we needed them most. They watched our friends die and did nothing. Why should we care what they think now? We offer you one chance." Captain Hayes said, "Order your home fleet to stand down. Recall all Vaxan military forces to your borders. And your empire's expansion permanently. And if I refuse?" "Then we will do to your people what you did to the Keplers," Admiral Morrison replied. "The difference is, we have the ships and the weapons to make it permanent." Kythex stared at the human faces on his screen. He had expected to see rage or hatred, but their expressions were calm and professional. They were not threatening him out of anger. They were simply stating facts. "You are bluffing," he said weakly. "You do not have enough ships to invade our territory." "War Prime," Admiral Morrison said. "You came here with 2,000 ships. We have destroyed most of them with less than half our fleet. Our shipyards are producing new vessels every day. And unlike you, we know how to fight a real war." The transmission ended, leaving Kythex alone with his thoughts. Around him, his ship continued to die. Through the cracked windows of his bridge, he could see human ships everywhere, their dark hulls moving like predators through the wreckage of his fleet. For the first time in his life, War Prime Kythex understood what it meant to be prey. The Vaxan Empire had spent centuries hunting weaker species, never imagining that someday they might encounter a predator stronger than themselves. But the humans were not just stronger. They were smarter, faster, and more ruthless than any enemy the Vaxan had ever faced. And they were not content to simply defend themselves. They were coming for the empire that had dared to threaten their friends. And when they arrived, there would be no mercy for those who had shown none to others. The hunt was over. The Vaxan had lost. 3 months after the destruction of the Vaxan invasion fleet, the human armada arrived at the edge of the Vaxan home system. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the USS Apocalypse, and looked out at the enemies. Last stronghold, the Vaxan homeworld of Krathos was surrounded by the largest defensive fleet in galactic history. Over 5,000 warships orbited the planet in perfect formation. Their weapons pointed toward the approaching human force. Massive orbital stations bristled with enough firepower to destroy entire star systems. "Impressive," said Captain Ryan. Powell, who had transferred to serve as Morrison's tactical officer. "They have been preparing for us," Morrison nodded calmly. "Yes, they have. But they are still thinking like the old Vaxan Empire. They believe that bigger is always better." The human fleet that approached Krathos was smaller than the enemy force, but it represented the pinnacle of human military engineering. Every ship had been built with one purpose: to end the Vaxan threat forever. The USS Apocalypse itself was a marvel of destruction, carrying weapons that could crack planets and defenses that could withstand the fury of a star. Supreme War Prime Vecthos, now the leader of all remaining Vaxan forces, watched the humans approach with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. He had seen the recordings from the Sol System battle. He knew what these creatures were capable of. But this was his home, his empire's heart, and he would defend it to the last ship. "All fleets, prepare for battle," he commanded from his flagship, the Empire's Wrath. "Today we show the galaxy that the Vaxan Empire cannot be destroyed." But even as he spoke the words, Vecthos could see the doubt in his officer's eyes. News of the Sol System massacre had spread throughout the Empire. Entire star systems had surrendered without a fight rather than face the human fleet. The Empire that had once controlled a quarter of the galaxy was now reduced to this single system. "Supreme War Prime," his sensor officer reported. "The humans are broadcasting on all frequencies." Admiral Morrison's face appeared on screens throughout the Vaxan fleet and on the planet below. His expression was calm, almost peaceful, but his eyes held the cold fire of absolute determination. "I am Admiral Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Fleet," he began. 3 months ago, your forces invaded the Sol System. You came to destroy humanity and our friends. You failed. Now we have come to your home to deliver justice. Vecthos felt his blood chill at the human's tone. This was not the voice of a conqueror seeking glory. This was the voice of an executioner. You have one opportunity to surrender, Morrison continued. Lay down your weapons, disband your military, and submit to galactic oversight. Your people will be allowed to live, but your empire ends today. And if we refuse? Vecthos found himself asking, though he already knew the answer. Morrison's expression did not change. Then you will share the fate you intended for the Keplers. Total extinction. The transmission ended, and the Vaxen fleet prepared for the final battle of their empire. But what followed was not a battle. It was a demonstration of why humanity had become the most feared species in the galaxy. Commander Alex Turner led the first wave of Ghost Squadron ships as they phased into normal space directly behind the Vaxen defensive line. The enemy had been watching the human fleet approach from the front, never imagining that ships could simply appear behind their formations. Turner's quantum torpedoes tore through a dozen Vaxen battleships before they could even turn to face this new threat. The carefully planned defensive formation dissolved into chaos as ships tried to respond to attacks coming from impossible directions. Phase 2, execute, Admiral Morrison ordered calmly. The USS Apocalypse and her sister ships opened fire with their main weapons. The railgun slugs they fired were larger and faster than anything used in the Sol System battle. When they struck the massive Vaxen orbital stations, the structures simply ceased to exist, turned into clouds of superheated gas. Captain Lisa Hayes commanded the USS Phantom as it materialized inside the enemy formation. Her ship's stealth systems made it invisible even at close range, allowing her to target enemy command ships with surgical precision. This is for the Keplers, she whispered as she fired her weapons. The Vaxen fleet fought desperately, but they were facing an enemy that had perfected warfare to an art form. Human ships moved through their formation like wolves among sheep, striking without warning and vanishing before retaliation was possible. On the bridge of the Empire's wrath, Supreme War Prime Vecthos watched his empire die in real time. Ships that had terrorized 100 worlds were being destroyed faster than his sensors could track. The humans were not just winning. They were demonstrating their complete superiority in every aspect of combat. War Prime, his communications officer called out, "The orbital defense platforms are falling. The humans are targeting our ground installations." Through the main viewer, Vecthos could see the planet Krathos below. Explosions were blooming across the surface as human ships destroyed military bases, weapons factories, and command centers with pinpoint accuracy, but the civilian cities remained untouched. They are not targeting our people, he realized with growing amazement. They are only destroying our military. It was true. Despite their overwhelming power, the humans were being selective in their targets. They were not conducting the kind of genocide that the Vaxen had inflicted on the Keplers. They were dismantling the Empire's ability to make war while sparing the innocent colonel. Sarah Mitchell led the human marine forces as they began boarding operations on crippled Vaxen ships. Her soldiers moved through alien corridors with the same ruthless efficiency they had shown in the Sol System, but their orders were different this time. "Secure all military personnel," she commanded. "Protect any civilians. We are here to end their ability to make war, not to slaughter innocents." The difference between human and Vaxen military philosophy became clear in those boarding actions. Where the Vaxen had shown no mercy to anyone, the humans distinguished between soldiers and civilians, between those who chose to fight and those who had no choice. Dr. Rachel Stone coordinated the psychological warfare campaign from her station aboard the USS Apocalypse. Across the Vaxen fleet and planet, her broadcasts showed the reality of the situation. "Your empire is finished," her voice said over images of burning warships and destroyed bases. "Your leaders brought this destruction upon you when they chose to murder innocent people, but you still have a choice. Surrender now and live. Continue fighting and share their fate." The effect was immediate. Entire squadrons of Vaxen ships began surrendering, their crews overwhelmed by the hopelessness of their situation. On the planet below, Military units threw down their weapons rather than face the approaching human forces. Supreme War Prime Vecthos found himself alone on his flagship. Most of his fleet either destroyed or surrendered. His empire, which had seemed so powerful just months ago, was nothing but debris floating in space. "Admiral Morrison," he said over the communication system, "I request terms for surrender." Morrison's face appeared on his screen one final time. "There are no terms. You will order all remaining Vaxxan forces to stand down immediately. Your military will be disbanded. Your weapons will be destroyed. Your empire ends now. And our people will be allowed to live," Morrison replied. "Under galactic supervision, you can rebuild as a peaceful civilization, but you will never again threaten another species." Vecthos looked around his ruined bridge at the bodies of his officers and the smoke rising from damaged consoles. He thought about the billions of Vaxxan on the planet below, waiting to learn their fate. "I surrender," he said quietly. "All Vaxxan forces, lay down your weapons. The war is over." The last shots of the battle were fired an hour later as human ships destroyed the final Vaxxan weapons platforms. When the shooting stopped, the most powerful military empire in galactic history had been reduced to a collection of refugees. Under human protection, Admiral Morrison stood before the assembled representatives of the Galactic Council, who had finally arrived to witness the end of the Vaxxan Empire. The alien diplomats looked at him with a mixture of fear and awe. "The Vaxxan threat has been eliminated," he announced. "Their military is destroyed, their leaders captured, and their ability to wage war permanently removed." The Altarian delegate, the only species that had supported humanity during the crisis, stepped forward. "Admiral Morrison, the galaxy owes humanity a great debt. You have freed us all from a terrible threat." Morrison's expression remained cold. "The galaxy owes us nothing. You all abandoned us when we needed help. You watched our friends die and did nothing. We did not fight for you. We fought for justice." He turned to address the full assembly. "Let this be a lesson to all civilizations. Humanity will not tolerate the slaughter of innocent people. We will not stand by while bullies destroy the weak. And we will not forget who our real friends are." The Admiral paused, his voice carrying across the silent chamber. "We are establishing a memorial station in the ruins of New Kepler Prime. It will serve as a reminder of what happens when evil goes unchecked. And it will be protected by the full might of the Earth Defense Fleet. Anyone who threatens the innocent, anyone who preys on the weak,